This is going to be cool.
The topics and opinions expressed on the Dudes and Beer podcast are intended for an audience of 18 and up and are solely those of the host and guest. They neither reflect the opinions or values of either the sponsors of Dudes and Beer or your mother. I mean, seriously. Have you ever heard these guys? They'll talk about anything.
Whoa, hey, you think they're going to show it? They'll probably just blur it out. Whoa, check it out, Beavis.
Grab your beverages and turn up your interweb. Solving the world's problems 12 ounces at a time. It's Dudes and Beer.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome officially to episode 93 of the Dudes and Beer podcast. I am Chris Jordan, your host. With me, as always, is the stalwart
Stephen Bishop.
Also with us tonight, for the first time ever, is our new public relations and events coordinator, Julie Connally.
Hello.
She has joined the conversation tonight, as well as our good friend Jeffrey Gottlieb.
Yes. Good evening.
And we're going to be talking about some wild stuff tonight. We're going to be talking about the crazy storms that happened in Texas over the last few days, as well as the severe weather that's been going on all over the country. You know, California has dams that are overflowing.
Oh, they sure are.
All kinds of stuff. They are way beyond their drought now. Let's just put it that way. And changes to the earth, all kinds of things, and what that will do, how that will impact us whenever we get back from this message from our sponsors.
Have you ever thought about brewing your own beer? Is the urge to brew there, but you just don't know how to get started? Well, Dudes and Beer is here to help. Stop on by the new Dudes and Beer Amazon store and check out all the great brewing supplies and gear today. We have it all, from instructional books and do-it-yourself kits for beginners to 16-gallon cooking vessels, carboys, bottling supplies, and cleaners for all you homebrew pros out there. Everything you need to brew your favorite beverages, even distilling equipment. So stop on by the official Dudes and Beer store today and get your hand on the greatest new brewing essentials. Simply visit dudesandbeer.com and click the Dudes and Beer store tab. Once again, that website is dudesandbeer.com and click the Dudes and Beer store tab today. Happy brewing, everybody. And until next time, drink responsibly.
And we are back. Yes, make sure to go on by and visit the new Dudes and Beer store. All kinds of fun goodies there. Distilling supplies, brewing supplies, everything that you need to make your favorite beverages.
Some literature you can read up on.
That's right. That's right. And as we start this episode, we're actually going to get into Jeffrey is huge into the craft beer scene for years and years. He's brought some special stuff for us to try tonight. Apparently, he is big into the whiskey bourbon ales, stuff like that. And while I start the grill, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about the beer that we're drinking first here, Jeffrey?
Happy to do it. This is a beer that I got from my good friend Julie Connally, who is now the PR person. It is from Real Ale Brewing here in Texas. It is an Imperial Rye IPA aged in rye whiskey barrels.
Oh, yeah.
And it is delicious.
It sure is.
And, so I think we're going to... So it's got it... it's interesting in the beer world to see how the whiskey barrels that used to be thrown away or sent to Home Depot are now being picked up by the brewers, and the brewers are aging beer in it and doing spectacular things with it. I've had rye whiskey beers, bourbon barrel-aged beers, and actually tequila barrel-aged beers.
Now, which one would you say that you enjoy the most?
The bourbon barrel imperial stouts and stuff. Yeah.
I can see
it draws a lot of that whiskey flavor out. It's fantastic. And it might kick the alcohol up just a little bit.
Right. And the flavor is in that barrel, right? Is that, if I understand it right? That's what I totally get. It's the secret is the barrel.
Yep.
Now, how often, I guess you were just saying that it's kind of a newer trend for people to be doing this. How many brewers do you know of that are actually producing bourbon ales right now, where they're actually aged in bourbon casks or in tequila casks, like you were saying?
I think I can think of about 15 or 20 that are doing it right now. And it's actually become a commodity market where there's a certain set number of casks. If those of you don't know whiskey, a bourbon barrel can only be used once to make bourbon. It's
Just
first
once.
use.
Yep.
They char the barrel, they use it once, and then used to be they would sell them to home improvement stores to use as planters.
Yeah.
Well, some genius, some God-blessed genius, decided to put beer in it.
Nice.
And got these fantastic flavors. There's a local brew pub near here. I don't know if I should mention who they are, but they
Go
have...
for it. Go for
it's North by Northwest. They probably have 5 or 6 different whiskey barrels that they're using. There's Garrison Brothers, which is a Texas whiskey. They're doing Jack Daniels and Maker's Mark and Woodford, and they're aging different types of beer in each of those barrels.
It's kind of like one man's trash, it's one man's treasure, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because there is a huge movement in the brewing industry right now. Actually, Hops and Grain, who we drink frequently on the show, is known as a sustainable brewery. They reuse all of their meal, everything else. They make dog biscuits, all kinds of stuff out of it. There's a company out of Florida now recently that we actually covered on Dudes and Beer
we did.
about 6 months ago that has started making 6-pack rings out of their compressed used materials. That way, if it gets into the environment, it literally biodegrades and it's fish food instead of a danger to the environment.
It's a great idea,
That's
man.
such a good idea.
It's a great environment, because I mean it's already there. Why would you not use it? And it's kind of like you were saying with the whiskey barrels, the whole idea of it's already there. Why not use it to enhance something instead of it literally being thrown away or used as a planter? And which is still a great reuse of something.
But how many planters are people really buying? I mean, it's definitely better to make beer out of it.
Oh, absolutely.
True that.
Especially whenever you're talking how many casks they're getting rid of, because they aren't necessarily, leaving a whole bunch of stuff in 20-year casks, whenever you're talking about liquor distilling and whiskey distilling, stuff like that. That's their select reserve, so they aren't going to have nearly as many as what they put out like every 3-4 years.
Because I think Beam, the latest Beam commercial, says they've aged it for 4 long years,
Right.
which is pretty...
That's pretty young.
That's a
It's
pretty
like
short
5
time
hot
frame.
That's pretty young.
Because
And-
they can't do anything with it after that. They've got that barrel, and
Well, that's just it. The barrel is literally occupying inventory space.
At that point, yeah. Taking up space.
At the point that you get where, you're producing that much whiskey, you literally have to keep a rotation going. And like I said, the private stock is the private stock. The high-end Jim Beam that they're letting sit for 20 years in a cask, definitely in as many barrels as what they're putting out every 4 years in order to have a rotation. And it's interesting because, it's the same thing with wine barrels, except for wine, they use it for more than one use.
and wine, they're actually doing some beer in
Yeah.
wine barrels, and the one tequila beer, Carbach in Houston, they do their Trikila. It's a Belgian triple aged in tequila barrels.
Oh,
But the
wow.
Tequila barrels were previously used to age red wine. So you get the winey quality, the agave quality in the beer, and it's very complex.
I bet that's interesting. I'd like to try that.
That's a good one.
Yeah, and I'd like to say hi to Handsome Dave out there in Houston, Texas.
Handsome Dave.
How you doing, Handsome Dave? Welcome to the conversation.
Welcome, Dave.
We're talking about some different beers and different brewing concepts.
Thanks for tuning
Things like
in.
that, Dave. Thanks so much for tuning in. And, I guess, like we were saying the other day in Julie's garage, the craft brewing industry really took off probably about 20 years ago, where it really kicked in.
There was a
and you
spike.
started and there's definitely a spike now, but it took a long time for that kind of to get ground roots. And you were discussing just before the podcast about Carbach and how Budweiser had picked them up. There's this huge fear about microbrews, craft brews being scooped up by major distributors. What do you think about that, Jeffrey?
I'm a little unsettled by it, but the proof is in the pudding.
Sure.
I read an article today that after many years, Christine Sellos has finally been able to secure the rights to use her name to brew her beer again after they sold to Miller so many years ago.
Wow.
Miller bought the brand, tanked it, and they weren't they weren't able to use the name anymore. Well, Christine Sellis finally secured the name again. And read an article today that said they're going to build brewing here in Austin.
I saw that article. Julie posted that
amazing.
Today, which is great.
No, Jeffrey did.
Was that you, Jeffrey? Okay,
that's great.
Yeah, okay, that's what it was.
And that was one of the first real Austin breweries.
Yeah.
And it just vanished. I mean, they were the first to produce a Belgian Belgian wit beer.
Wow.
Yeah.
And some that was the Sellis White, which was known everywhere.
Yeah.
And then Miller bought it and shut it down. Budweiser's bought two big breweries. Well, they bought Red Hook years ago, but they recently bought Goose Island last year and Karbach just recently.
I knew about Karbach. You just informed me about Goose Island earlier.
But they've kept their hands out of the tinkering with the recipes. They're funding expansion. They're
good.
Driving distribution, so there's more of those beers available now.
Yeah.
But I haven't noticed a drop off in the quality.
That's good that they don't tinker with the recipes. I mean, if it's already good, you don't want to fix something that isn't broken. You know what I mean?
Well,
it's
and
great.
Not only that, it's the fact that people have come to love this brew for a specific reason. Even Budweiser, even I'll admit it, you see it in the studio all the time. I drink Coors Banquet, and
true.
I like some Coors Banquet. It's all right. For a straight lager, it's okay.
And the stubbies, little stubby bottles.
Whenever I can find the throwbacks, typically it's in the cans. And for the stubbies, I typically go for Session, which is out of the Oregon area, and I love them. I love Session. It's a great, just all-around lager.
Which isn't usually at a convenience store normally.
No, you can't find it at your local convenience store. Some HEBs carry it here locally. Just about all of the Twin Liquors
little beer
here locally. Yeah, it's great just for a general beer.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what it's about when it comes to craft beers, because there's that go-to beer that we all have.
Redbird.
Shiner Redbird would be Julie's, and I remember when that was a seasonal. And it's interesting because we were talking earlier before the show about when Coors, that was really one of the first big microbrew acquisitions that happened in the industry, was when Coors picked up the distribution of Shinerbach. And I remember I lived in Maine at the time, and that was like, oh my God, I may be able to get Shinerbach. And it only came up to New York. And that's as close as I could get it. I was still smuggling a case back in every checked bag, just wrapping it in shirts, wrapping each bottle in a shirt and tucking it in my check bag.
What
and whatever
people
happened,
do for
happened.
their favorite beer.
Oh yeah, and I literally drank a Shinerbach a week for months on end. Whenever I came home twice a year, so I had Shinerbach for months on end. And whenever someone would come over and be like, "Oh, what's that?" It's like, "Yeah, you can have a Shiner, just one."
just
the one.
Well, the beer smuggling, I remember doing that. I used to travel a lot more, and I'd go back to the Carolinas and Georgia.
Sure.
And I'd go to some little place that'd have the spectacular beer, so I'd hunt down through 5 liquor stores to find some of this beer to wrap in a sock and a plastic bag and secure it in the middle, the most padded part of my suitcase, and just pray that they didn't, drive stout all over the inside of my suitcase. But I managed to get them all back safely.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. And Handsome Dave was just mentioning, what was it? Mary Bourbon Ale. And I haven't had that one myself, but that's definitely on the list now for me to find.
Oh, yeah?
Because I do like a good bourbon ale. I do like something that's a little bit different, a little bit darker.
Darker, I was going to say.
And the bourbon definitely brings about the smoky.
It adds a roundness, a depth. There's some different kind of sweetness, but
it's a lot more on the malty than it is on the hoppy.
Oh yeah,
the sweetness and the caramel is definitely there and present with it. And I don't know. To me, brewing is just such an art form. I love it.
Oh yeah,
I love it.
Definitely.
Have you ever done any home brewing yourself, Jeffrey?
I'm a relentless tinkerer.
Okay.
I love to cook, because when I cook a dish, I have until that dish hits the table to make modifications to it. But with beer, you do the cooking up front and you wait 6 weeks to see if you got it right or got it wrong. And I just can't do that. And there's so many and there's so many people that are putting it, I can see a time when home brewing was necessary because there were no decent local beer in many communities. And now there's so much great beer in every community. It actually goes back to a model from 100 and something years ago when you were in a city.
Yeah.
And a city would have 10, 15 breweries. A city like Chicago had breweries everywhere.
Wow.
Even the local store, the corner store,
Well,
would brew beer that you'd take home in a bucket.
It really takes you back
That's
to
awesome.
Really the founding of America, and like we were talking about the other day, the whole concept that the right after the American Revolution was the Whiskey Revolution, and we had to have some way to pay back the debt for the American Revolution. And it was like, well, let's pass a debt, let's pass a tax on alcoholic beverages.
What are we good at?
It's like, whoa, wait a minute. We can't do that because there's the public house, and like every pub had their own brew. You know, it's not like, I mean, sure, there were some breweries in places around the country, but typically whatever you were drinking was brewed there at the pub. You know, and it's interesting to me whenever I go to Vegas because I see that a lot. I see it a lot where they have like their own house brew and stuff like that. Yeah,
Hawaii too.
Yeah, yeah, and it's fantastic. It's really great because you get to try something different. You know, you get to try something interesting instead of having your typical just Goose Island or something like that, which I recently fell in love with. Goose Island.
Now, their Bourbon County Stout is simply spectacular. It's, again, another bourbon barrel-aged imperial stout, which you take a high-alcohol beer and put it in a whiskey cask.
Yeah.
Pulls some nice flavors, but a little bit of alcohol out of it, too.
Now,
unbelievable.
Have you had anything from Blue Owl Brewery?
Yes.
Here in town?
Yes.
Because I saw some of that. I mean, they opened up right as I moved from my old neighborhood. They were literally right around the corner from my house. And I saw some of their stuff today, and I found it interesting, number one, that most of their stuff is sold in 4-packs, not in 6-packs. And then it seems like they really focus on the sour.
Sours and wilds.
Yeah. Explain that concept a little bit to us, because you're a little bit more well-versed and rounded in it than I am.
Sours, there's a lot of sours that come out of Europe. There's the Flemish sours and things like that. It's just a different type of yeast. And it creates almost a winey quality to the beer rather than the classic malty or hoppy style. The wild fermented goes back to Belgium, where they would boil the grains and put them in these big fermentation tanks and then open the louvers on the side of the brewery and allow the yeast that's in the air to blow in and ferment the tanks.
Yeah, almost cross-pollinate the brew.
So that's
really
and then
cool.
that the lambics, the Belgian lambics, are made that way.
Okay.
So the wild beers are, it's not adding a proprietary yeast culture. It's usually allowing this wild yeast to
whatever is local and going on in the air around you.
Yeah.
So that's interesting to me,
That is.
because I mean, not many people realize that there is just this entire science to brewing.
Sure is,
and that there is like an entire microculture of critters going on inside of this bottle to make the alcohol happen. And kind of going off from that into what we're talking about this evening, weather, things like that. It much like subtleties in temperature, subtleties in humidity, everything affects the way your brew happens. It's the same way with weather here. And here recently we've had some crazy weather in Texas. Like, I mean, Stephen had his whole fence. Tell us about your fence and everything. We had some crazy weather systems that were like,
it was insane, man. Let me tell you, this past Sunday night, I literally had to hunker down for the first time when I heard the wind blowing like a train.
Yeah, you were texting me about it.
Yeah, and
I was quit texting me. Go get shelter.
I was actually texting my friend Chris over here because I was like, hey, I might not make it out of this, but just let you know if I don't, that's what happened.
If
I don't make it Tuesday, here's what happens.
You might need to find somebody to fill that chair.
Exactly. That's kind of like my outlook at that moment when I was texting you. I was like, hey, brother, this is what's going on. Yeah, and my fence is, was until yesterday, yesterday, scattered all over the road, blocking the road, and a power pole, the electrical pole was on my neighbor's house, which was the lines running through my fence and yard and all, and there was multiple lines and stuff, and just debris everywhere, and I don't think I took any extensive roof damage. I don't think it looked pretty good, and I went up in the attic and
no
checked.
leaks or nothing, because
No.
you've got a fairly new construction
yeah.
house, and this is really the first.
And we had about
big
6
McGillicuddy you've
months
been
ago,
through.
like a good gust of wind over there, and I did have some shingles and stuff, and I had roof work done. But this one here, man, they said it was like 70, 80 mile per hour wind. I think it was more at that point, but it felt like the house was coming apart, and I literally was like, it's time to go get in the tub. And I never felt like
that interior closet, bro.
I never felt like that before. So, I was like, no, this is something different here. And I had a neighbor that actually walked by while I was picking up debris and stuff outside the other day. Lived one street over. He had a 2-story home. And he said when he heard that wind, he lived up in Kansas, and he was used to the, tornadoes and stuff like that, high winds and stuff. So he said when he stood up out of his bed that it was shaking, like the ground beneath the floor was shaking and moving. And he grabbed his daughter and said, "We get in the bathtub,"
Yeah.
And I'm in a 1-story, so I didn't feel the shaking of the floor, but I can definitely see, I totally it. To me, it was getting close to like, hey, you might not see tomorrow, buddy.
Well, we've had some crazy stuff over just the last year here in Texas. I make the joke that seems like every time we go to Houston, whether it was Meekum.
Yeah.
Because if you remember, whenever you're wearing the shirt from
I
Meekum,
sure am, yeah.
Whenever we went to Meekum, it was like, oh, why don't you guys come by for lunch? Why don't y'all hang out for lunch? And it was like, nah, we really need to get on the road.
Right.
And sure enough, by the time we hit halfway to your house, the rain started, and it was like a full-on flood in Houston and Katy, and we barely made it to your house.
There was I think it was Katy, somewhere between, us coming home.
It was solid the whole way.
I remember I felt like you were hydroplaning a couple of times,
Quite a few times.
It was an intense rain that
it was nasty. Fortunately, the car was loaded down with gear in the back. And that always helps,
I want to say, was that following day, didn't Houston get feet and feet of rain or whatever?
Oh yeah, no, they got 12 inches of rain that day.
Yeah.
Whenever we left, and then they got like another 6 or 7 the next day.
It was insane flooding in Houston.
And literally every time I've been to Houston this year, like I leave and there's some kind of natural catastrophe.
Right.
It's been crazy, but looking at that pattern, looking at things that are going on even globally,
right?
With weather patterns, it's wild to me. Living in Maine like I did for 5 years, to see the fact that they had a pretty slow winter last year. There are cycles that we go through, and you're from up around that area.
Yeah, I'm from Boston.
Yeah, and it's And
so what do you consider slow for that area? Because the norm and for them is probably big for us, a big winter. You know what I mean?
Yeah, growing up, I remember we had basically from like Halloween until March was freezing, and it could snow at any time, and it did. I mean, I literally had a car engine explode once because the block got so cold that I went to turn it on, and the car blew up.
Wow.
And that doesn't happen. My sister moved back up there 3 years ago, I think. And they had one winter with some snow, but basically it's not like that anymore. It's pretty mild. My friend Sonia just moved, and she said that it was 70 degrees there just like 3 days ago.
When it should have been maybe freezing, correct?
Maybe freezing,
right?
absolutely.
Wow.
It's crazy. And this is like very recent changes. It's dramatic.
And I've heard this is happening all over, like these changes that are kind of out of the norm for the particular season or season,
I was telling Chris, with my day job, I was talking to a guy from Alaska who lived in a small island in Alaska, and he was calling to get his spring insurance set up. And I was like, well, isn't it still cold there or snowing? And he was like, no, it's 32 degrees. We haven't had any snow yet this year. That's Alaska.
What?
They haven't had any snow on the island.
What?
It was crazy.
That is crazy.
And they're in like a severe drought because all of their moisture comes from the snow, and they haven't had any snow, so they don't have any water. Minus the ocean that they're literally surrounded by, but doesn't help too much.
Well, you can't grow things with salt water,
Right.
unfortunately.
Yeah, and it's probably a small operation.
Yeah, I
they
guess
probably
it's a
don't
little
have a
problem with salt water.
desalinator.
Wait, can't you grow peat for making scotch? Can't
You can.
Well, so they
You
could just
can't
drink
make
away
meat.
the winter.
So there's a cottage industry to be made
Which,
there.
oddly
Silver lining.
enough, the two states in the union with the largest per capita breweries, Maine and Alaska.
Gotta fill that winter somehow.
Yeah, you got and that's just it. Because until I moved there, and it was funny because my girlfriend, right as I moved there, we had Katrina down here, and she was like, "Oh my God, I don't know how you guys deal with hurricanes and stuff down there like every year." And I'm like, "That's funny because we look at the weather and we're like, my God, how do those people deal with blizzards every year?"
Right.
You know, like it's completely and utterly the flip.
Yeah.
And whenever you live in Maine, it's literally the fact of, hey, you know, there's only a foot and a half of snow on the ground. Why are you late for work? In Houston, it's the fact of, hey, there's only a foot of water on the ground. Why are you late for work?
Yeah.
Totally.
You know, I
There's
mean,
only a
it's
foot.
the exact, yeah, there's only a foot of water. What's your problem?
I can't. I'm sorry, I can't quite relate to either of those
Yeah.
because I grew up in Southern California. And,
Nice.
And Southern California, we did have seasons. You had fire season, flood season, earthquake season, and riot season.
And they are in the big midst right now
Of the flood.
season.
The flood.
And it's crazy because like they have been in a drought for so many years where they have been pulling water from Las Vegas and stuff like that. You know, I mean the whole movie Chinatown is the creation of the water system
Yeah.
from Las Vegas down to LA and beyond. And it's wild because they are literally right now they have no idea. They've been in a drought for so long that they're in a situation that we are. Whenever we have major floods and stuff like that, because we're in the hill country, we're prone to mudslides, all kinds of stuff. And California is very much in the same basket.
There was on Pacific Coast Highway between Santa Monica and Malibu, there was one section of the hillside that actually, because of all the rain one year, slid down probably a 50-foot high mountain, for lack of a better word, slid 20 feet into the roadway.
Oh.
And so after that, you could drive up the coast, and Caltrans, the transportation authority, would not repaint the lines around this mountain that rolled out onto the road.
You would not?
So you had
What?
the border, you know, the border line, the dotted line, and everything going straight into the mountainside. Now they had signs, you know, barricades to kind of point you in the direction to go around it. But they, for 10 years, they would not change the lines on that road. They would just
Redirect
that
you.
goes right into the mountain. It's like no. But the mudslides there would cut my business off. You know, I couldn't get up there to. I was selling beer at the time. Funny enough, I couldn't get up there to do it because they'd have the fires, and the season right after the fires, they'd have all that rain, and there's nothing to hold it back, and all the mudslides down.
Yeah,
onto
there's
the road.
no root systems or anything like that left, and it literally just
vegetation to
washes
hold
out.
it.
Yeah.
And and I mean we're up against the same thing here whenever it happens. It's really wild. We have crazy flash floods here in the hill country whenever things happen because of the type of soil that we have. It doesn't necessarily
Clay.
Yeah.
It's all clay.
Yeah, it's all soft clay that's in layers as opposed to like Houston gumbo clay, you know, that will just soak up water and soak up water and soak up water and just get thicker.
We have. I tell people that aren't familiar with Austin soil is half clay and half limestone. Mm-hmm. You have to dig through the clay to get to the limestone, but that's why nothing. You know, very rarely does stuff really percolate down into the ground. Now it does into the aquifer, the Edwards Aquifer, which is awesome, but so much of it is out in places where there isn't really any aquifer, and it just, as you said, the rain comes down. We had that storm at our house. We had 2.5 inches of rain the other night, which is not a ton compared to Houston, but that's still a lot of water coming down over the course of one night.
Yeah. And that's just it. You know, it really starts to flood the infrastructure. It starts to make it to where, you know, I mean, we have warnings all over the place all the time. Turn around, don't drown.
Yep.
Is the statement here in Texas, because you really have no idea what that water system is doing, even though it's 1.5 feet deep. You know, they show images all the time of cars in Houston getting washed off into the bayou, stuff like that, and even roads washing away, which is the issue in California right now.
Yep.
They've got roads washing away all over the place because these dams are literally just overflowing and overflooding.
Or some spots where the road, the ground under the road gets so wet that it creates a sinkhole, and you have a major highway that there's a
right in the middle.
30-foot wide hole in the middle of the road.
Yeah, and it's interesting
insane.
Because, you know, these weather systems, living in Texas, we have this hurricane system that goes on, and this hurricane cycle, but we really haven't had the hurricane cycle in like 2 years.
Longer than that.
We've had some tropical storms, we've had some tropical depressions,
right?
But we haven't had the typical like annual hurricane that we have.
Here comes the big one,
And-
type deal.
Yeah, you just jinxed it.
Yeah,
I know, right?
Thanks, Chris.
Watch this
Sorry.
week. We'll
No.
do one.
that's literally what Handsome Dave typed just a second ago. Stop bringing all these weather systems to Houston.
Sorry, Handsome Dave.
Stop coming to Houston.
It's been years since Houston's gotten hit.
That is unlikely to happen.
I remember coming back from Maine right after, I guess, the last big tropical storm happened, where flooding happened and everything else, and the actual, not many people realized that there's actually a tunnel system under downtown Houston, and that got flooded out.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah. There's
Really?
like a little subterranean town underneath downtown with all these little tunnels that connect
Wow.
businesses and buildings,
City
and
of Zion's down
stuff
there?
like that.
What do you got, Morlocks?
Yeah.
There's Morlocks under Houston?
It's all the leftovers from Enron.
All the leftovers.
It's the Enron tunnels. But like whenever I first moved home, I was doing work at the Alley Theater, and their entire basement and their storage and their workshop had been flooded over. Like
Jeez.
you could see the flood lines like all the way up to like the ramps and stuff. It was crazy. And you know, with all this stuff happening, like one of the articles that I posted today on Dudes and Beer was the Inuit elders have actually warned NASA that there has been a shift in the pole. And this is a typical thing, like we talked about in the episode with Stone.
And that only happens like every so hundreds of thousands of years.
Yeah, well, every 10 to 20.
Oh, 10
every
to
10 to 20. And supposedly we're overdue for that.
Right.
If you actually look at like magnetite deposits in lava.
Those are the people that go out to the volcanoes and stuff that analyze the flows of the magma. They can tell by the iron deposits and stuff. Yeah,
because the iron deposit directly aligns to magnetic north, and they're actually they can show where the magnetic pole actually flips every few thousand years, and we're apparently overdue for that. But what grasped me today was that the Inuit elders had told NASA that there's apparently been some shift because, well, they're pretty used to their hunting times and how long they have every day to hunt. You know, they've been hunting up there for just a minute or two, and with I don't know, we talk about it a lot. I'm more willing to trust any Aboriginal observation
Me too.
than I am any scientific observation.
Yeah.
They're not in it for the money.
Yeah. Well, they're in it literally for the livelihood.
You take that
and for
money
the
aspect
living of
and
it.
factor out, then you know I can trust
and
you a little more.
Like these people have been hunting by this for hundreds of years, if not thousands in some cases. And whenever you talk about them saying the sun used to set behind this mountain and now it sets slightly off to the side, the Earth actually wobbles on its pole. There's a hold on, let me get this right. There is actually a geocentric north to the Earth, and there's a magnetic north, and the two deviate by about 11 or 12 degrees, something like that. And the magnetic north actually wobbles on axis.
Right.
It's a small wobble. It's actually, if you look at it, and on the episode post for tonight, we have an image of it. And you can see the conical rotation of the magnetic pole. And if you kind of follow that by physics, think about it like a spinning quarter on a table. That's kind of what the Earth is.
Right.
Now, at some point, that coin's going to try to flip over, but it's going to hit a flat surface. Were it spinning in infinity, without that, it would actually flip rotation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the same thing that the Earth does with its magnetic pole.
Right.
It eventually hits such a wobble that it widens out, and the polar...
Yeah, it widens and
Yeah,
flips.
the poles actually flip on the Earth. And, apparently all kinds of crazy chaos can happen when that begins to happen. So, you look at all the weather systems that are happening, you look at the sunspots that are happening, you look at the fact that not the first time that the Earth's magnetic sphere has been breached, but the first time that we've recorded it. We actually recorded it for the first time. We see it all the time.
Now, would that necessarily mean if the poles flip, would that mean my toilet bowl flushes the opposite way now?
Yes. The Coriolis effect would now happen in the northern hemisphere instead of the southern.
That's
absolutely correct.
Right.
That is the Simpsons, straight up. That is Simpsons science.
I hope it doesn't happen like late on a Saturday night, early on a Sunday morning. Really freak you out. Like,
dude, after a hard night of drinking.
Yeah, right.
Like it actually stops for a second and then starts going the other way. You're like, oh, I gotta stop.
My
drinking.
chunks just stopped in mid motion. What the hell?
You gotta tell all your friends and invite them in. Hey, come here. You gotta see this.
Dude, come here. Come here and check this out.
You gotta see this guy. Come here. My chunks are right there. Oh my gosh.
But,
that's hilarious.
Just thinking about the way that our weather systems are now, like Julie was saying, typically, even whenever I moved to Maine in 2004, it snowed on Halloween.
Yeah, that often happens.
It was not an infrequent thing, and it was not an infrequent thing for us to have like 1.5 feet of snow by Thanksgiving. I remember us digging out of a couple feet of snow my first groundhog there to be able to make it down to Pennsylvania for Punxsutawney for groundhog.
Wow.
And, now seeing all my friends' posts on the internet and things like that, there's some stuff going on like in northern Maine, but as far as Portland goes, it's not nearly the way it was. And it's strange to me that our weather systems, even now, like, good God, it's 70 degrees, I'd say. Easily.
Yep.
How the heck is that happening?
That I like.
Oh,
I don't want to think about what it means for the future, but I'm down for a nice warm winter.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I even, I post pictures all the time to my friends up there in Pennsylvania and all that, like, oh, sorry if you're not grilling outside today.
Well, I keep trying that, and then my sister sends back pictures where they're outside in t-shirts too, and they're like, well, it's 56 degrees here. I'm like, well, shoot.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just, I don't know, to me it's crazy to see that kind of stuff happening, to see the weather that we've known, the white Christmas that you guys know up in Massachusetts, Maine, New Hampshire, and the New England area.
Yeah, no, it isn't a thing. Now it's a white February.
Yeah.
White February.
Yeah, it comes along and it's literally like a month and a half, and that's it. And I remember my last spring living in Maine. I was a crossing guard at the time during the day, and I was home for Cinco de Mayo, and the last thing I remember the week before I moved home was 1.5 feet of snow hitting the ground. And the kids were still going to school. It wasn't a snow day, nothing like that.
It's not like Austin?
No, it's not at all like Houston or Austin.
No, you guys get 2 days off.
It's a 1/4 inch of ice and the city shuts down.
I was going to say, we shut down.
No, like if it hits freezing temperatures, it shuts down.
Yeah, that happened 2 years ago.
This last year, it's like it was going to get cold and schools are closed.
Yeah, no, I remember the first year I moved home from Maine, I was at home in Houston and taking care of my mom, things like that. And she came home early, and so did the kids. And I was like, what the heck? Well, it's supposed to freeze. And I'm like
so?
Yeah.
Wear a coat.
It's noon. Why are you home? Like, you got to have 8 hours of freezing temperature before ice forms on the road. Like, they know that, right? So why are you coming home now when it hadn't even hit freezing temperatures yet? Like, just in
Because
case.
Extra cautious.
It's fixin' to.
Fixin'
No,
to.
That's
Fixin'
Texas.
to. That is the Texas phrase.
I like
Fixin'
that.
to.
From California, he's got it down. So.
I wasn't born here. I got here as fast as I could.
That's right, buddy. Well, and it to me, it's just one of those, like, I see stuff like that. I see it, and I'm not going to say that we do not contribute to the absolute cycle that goes on this earth. We contribute horrifyingly.
Yeah.
Horrifyingly.
In a more of a negative way,
Yeah.
killing all the fish with the plastic.
Yeah. Stuff like that. Good God, there was some video that I watched on my buddy's timeline the other day, like, where they were removing something from a sea turtle's nostril.
Oh.
And it was horrifying.
I think it was a straw.
It was. And those things are floating around everywhere.
Oh,
and like
God.
I said, to find beer companies that are making sustainable products, to
Right.
find people that are making sustainable things, that keep that out of the ocean, that keep that out, is fantastic. But how much are we contributing is my question. Right now we've had a crazy cycle, especially along the Pacific Rim, of volcanic eruptions. There's one still going on right now in Mexico as we speak.
Really?
Where it's still just kind of spewing fumes and stuff like that.
That plume up there or something?
Yeah. And, there is a regular cycle. There is something that goes on. Like we were saying earlier, polar ice caps on Mars are melting too.
Mm-hmm.
It's these coronal mass ejections from the sun.
Antarctica breaking up or something or other.
Well, Antarctica's definitely breaking up, and we definitely have something to do with that. I'm not going to say that our carbon footprint does not contribute to that. It absolutely
There's that
does.
100-mile or so long crack over in Pakistan. Did you hear about that?
Oh, there's a huge crack in Arizona right now. Mm-hmm. There's like a chasm that's formed in Arizona.
The Grand Canyon?
No, like beyond the Grand Canyon, right over near where all of the fault lines for Marianas and stuff like that are attached.
See you, California.
Yeah. And, there's the whole worry even about the Yellowstone caldera.
Yeah.
That's been a worry for years, and that's kind of where a lot of geologists are concerned with the stuff going on in Mexico right now, because that's connected right up along the same line.
Yeah.
Bye, Mexico.
Yeah.
Right.
Cat like
Good catch.
That's right. So, where do you stand, Jeff? Where do you see these things going over the next few years?
I will admit to being somewhat skeptical of anthropogenic global warming.
Okay.
It's a very complex system.
It is.
It's a very vast system.
Yeah.
And stuff kind of cleans itself. I think that, anything we can do to, within reason, to kind of reduce the amount that we pollute and destroy is great.
Right.
Yeah.
The problem is the data really can't be trusted.
Sure.
Because the people that are
They're still-
reporting the data have a vested interest in
I was gonna say
a
money.
particular thing, and it's money, it's funding. Nobody got funded for being a global warming denier.
Oh, I feel
True.
like some people are getting funded for that.
Well, they
totally
may be
agree.
now. They may be now.
A denier gets funded.
But generally, I think that in the 70s, those of us that were around, that have been around long enough to remember that, it was global cooling.
Yes,
and it was going to be
exactly.
horrific global
I remember
cooling.
acid rain in the 80s.
There was going to be there was going to be an entirely new ice age.
A new ice age.
A new ice age. They were literally talking about the grain belt in Europe being frozen over. Mm-hmm. They were talking about a third of the world's population starving out because of it. Things like that.
And what was their the date this was supposed to happen? These scientists.
There was no specific delivery date.
It was
I think
cooling.
they sort of wrapped
but
it
it
into
was-
climate change.
Yeah.
Well, it
Yeah.
had been. See, climate change is the new terminology.
It is.
Because it's less exact. It's more vague. We have global cooling.
Well, how could
that
we
is,
know exactly?
But I'm just saying, when it's reported or when it's posited that that's what's going to happen. It was global cooling. It was a horrendous thing, the new ice age.
Yeah.
Then it became global, and that didn't happen.
Right.
Then global warming. It's, it wasn't really happening the way that was supposed to come down.
True.
Al Gore. And so now
I like that.
It's
All
all climate change because that's more vague. You can couch it.
It goes
climate
either way.
change.
It goes either way.
Yeah, it's an all-encompassing thing. So anything that happens, you can chalk it up to global. You can chalk it up to climate change.
Yeah, and that to me is a big part of it. Is the rhetoric of it, because we do talk about that, and it's odd to me to see scientists on both sides of the spectrum, because like we've said numerous times on this show, science tends to be a religion nowadays, and they don't tend to even doubt themselves. They don't even tend to doubt the data. They have an expected result.
They get so far sucked into what they believe in, I think, they kind of rule everything out kind of in a way and shut.
Can you say bias?
Yeah, there you go. That's the way.
That can be the case. One of the articles that I posted today on Dudes and Beer was actually a trail cam image of a creature in Iowa that they had thought to be gone for 150 years. 150 years, there has not been a sighting of this critter. We thought it was gone. It is no longer in the ecosystem. But there it is on a trail cam. So technically, scientific change. As far as we knew, this critter was gone. Much like we've said about the coelacanth before.
Right.
You think the coelacanth's extinct. It's a part of the fossil record until 1979 when they catch one off the coast of Madagascar.
Right.
And come to find out there are shoals of them all over the ocean. Just got to actually be like trying to catch them and look for them and look for where they are.
Wait until the dodo pops back up.
Well, they're trying to make the mammoth again. That's
that was one that I posted about a week and a half ago, and that's
Yeah.
Russian scientists that have been doing stuff for about the last year and a half, 2 years, 3 years maybe. They discovered the frozen mammoth in the Ukraine, and it was the first full frozen mammoth that they'd found, and they've gone full on Jurassic Park with it, where like
maybe we should send them a copy of the
they
video.
I know.
It doesn't end well, guys.
Yeah, well, and that, just like there was some recent stuff that I posted on Dudes and Beer about 10,000-year-old life forms being brought out of crystals in the Nika cave, and it's cool that genetic material is still valid. Should we really be reviving critters from 10,000 years ago?
Yeah.
Seen that
I
movie
really want to
too.
see it.
I know. Like, I really want to see it too. I really want to see a mammoth.
I would go to that park and just cross my fingers so hard.
Brandy Shoneman, a friend of mine from high school, commented on the thing about the mammoth, and it was even on the one about where U.S. scientists were talking about being able to actually change the genome of embryos. And it's like, ooh, wow.
Okay, so let's send them the movie gift pack of Splice, Jurassic Park, The Thing. And while we're on the topic, let's talk about AI. AI, not a good idea. AI, smart AI. It's a point.
I'm with you.
AI, they've now said that some of the AIs tend to be kind of angry.
Angry.
They're getting a little hostile.
The one Microsoft had was very angry.
Yeah, no.
Oh,
yeah, the one from Microsoft.
We'll let her interact with people, and she turns into a total racist.
Oh, yeah, it was within 48 hours.
There was no time at all.
Yeah, it was like 48 hours. She was posting racist things and talking about Hitler and stuff like that.
That's more of a commentary on humanity
It is.
than on
And their
robots.
decision, we're going to shut it off.
It is, though. And I mean, but that's something that we've discussed, is the fact that we're the ones that, and
We're feeding the robot.
There's an interesting video, and we've played it before. I wish I had the clip right now because I would play it again. There's a great video from PBS, from a PBS series talking about AI, where they actually had a android made in the likeness of Philip K. Dick. And this android was programmed with all of the writings of Philip K. Dick, all of the lectures that he'd done, things like that, as well as just grammatic language of, I mean, it's an actual learning AI. And though it has all this stuff in there, it randomly associates its questions and forms its answers on its own. And, you know, one of the things that it was asked was, hey, what do you think's going to happen in the future? And he's like, well, you know, don't worry, my friend. I like you a lot. I'll make sure to keep you in my people zoo, and I'll come by and visit you. You know, and it's like, number one, this thing formed this thought on its own.
Yeah.
Number two, it formed sarcasm on its own. So kudos to you, programmer, to be able to actually program the sarcasm in there. And even the programming language, if you were just inputting the thoughts of Philip K. Dick and the writings and the lectures of Philip K. Dick, the fact that it could, from that question, organically form its own answer.
Draw an inference.
Right. Draw an inference.
And inference is that's the
humanity.
Yeah.
Well,
that's
like
the humanity.
Black Mirror, where they had the robots that took over when the spouse died or whatever, and it just got super dark and sad.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there's a whole movie, God, what is it?
not Frankenhooker.
No, not Frankenhooker at all.
That's a nice one.
I believe it's called Frankeneye.
It's never Frankenhooker.
It's never Frankenhooker. Never Frankenhooker. When will it be made? Come on, Tim Burton. You did Frankenweenie. Bring up the... But literally it was about how this robot, and they're talking about robots being used for, you know, elderly care, stuff like that, to be companions. And it was this robot that was bought by this family to be an elderly care companion for their dad, and ends up, you know, the dad starts to, like, the robot takes it to another level, and it's like really deep friendship. And it's like, well, what can I do to help you? I don't know. You know, I'm at the end of my life. I've really thought about, like, robbing a bank. Well, what can we do about that? Like, this AI takes it on itself to make this old dude happy. So it was really interesting in this crazy twist, but at the same time, whenever you're talking about AI, whenever you're talking about modeling, you know, like you're involved in the technology industry. I attend a lot of high-tech conferences, and metadata, things like that, the big data that they're looking for is absolutely different than what you're actually searching. You know, and the way that Google, Facebook, all these algorithms pick up what you're actually interested in is absolutely amazing and phenomenal, and is in and of itself AI.
I mean, we all have our phones on the table right now. You know, in our Facebook feed later is going to be everything that we talked about in a recommended search.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, even the last time I was in Vegas, right after you were there, Julie, Amy and I were walking past, I forget what it was. It was some rock and roll club in the Venetian. And I was like, you know, I've thought about stopping in there and talking to them about doing a live Dudes and Beer. Literally the next morning, they had liked me on Facebook.
Nice.
I had not liked them. I had not searched them or anything like that. My conversation, geolocation-wise, via Google, happened in front, like directly in front of their establishment.
It's like Minority Report, where it reads your iris, Mr. Takahashi, and it knows it, and it tailors advertising to you.
Yeah,
it sure does.
That's taking it from the phone to a higher level.
The world.
Scary.
I mean, sometimes it's convenient. I learn lots of cool stuff that's out there.
Right. I
feel like I'm going to be the first one eaten by these robots or set prison, because I'm like, yeah, let's see what'll happen. That
would be
seems cool.
ironic, wouldn't it?
I'm
You're a vegetarian and you get eaten by a robot?
Oh, no. That's totally going to happen. Right after Houston doesn't have a hurricane, I'm going to get eaten by robots.
That's it. That's exactly it.
I heard this other crazy thing about, like, okay, at what point does AI robots get, like, the same rights as humans?
No, and that was an article that I posted the other day. Actually, Bill Gates came out for the first time and said, if an AI is doing the job of a human,
They should pay taxes.
it needs to be taxed.
Yeah, I like it.
And I love it. I love it. I challenge Apple to say that.
Don't listen to him, Siri.
Come on, Siri. I've had some interesting conversations with Siri. I've got them saved too.
I know. You've texted me some of your interesting conversations
Very
with
interesting
Siri.
conversations.
It's wild. And, on that note, folks, it's literally the fact of everything runs in cycles, whether it's weather, brewing, what have you. We as human beings operate in cycles. We have an ingrained program that happens inside of us that's brought about from the time of birth. And we really have to sometimes fight against that programming to actually see the truth in society. Sometimes we actually have to fight hard against that program to accept other people's truths. And, that I think is what a lot of this episode was about tonight, kind of looking at the science of things, looking at the fact of, yes, we do affect the environment, but there's also a cycle that goes on. There's also something that happens.
But still recycle.
Still recycle. Still absolutely recycle. Recycle, reuse. I mean, I reuse all the time. The speaker box that I made tonight is made out of recycled parts from old things.
Is it the reason why there's history class is that so we remember history and don't repeat the past?
Yeah.
Good God, we hope
we still
don't
do all the
repeat.
But we
time.
absolutely
Yeah,
do.
Those who don't study history are
Yeah.
doomed to repeat it.
There it is. There it is.
Well, and that's just it. We are doomed to repeat it. And if we look at previous societies, if we look at previous cultures that have existed across the world, even if we look at the myth cultures that have existed across the world, there is a universal message of warning that happens across that. And it's literally the message of be concerned about your humanity, be concerned about yourselves, be concerned about how you treat each other, because that is what absolutely brings about the change. That is what absolutely brings about the transformation in humanity. And as we bring this episode to a close, the grill has been cut off, food is ready.
Yes.
We're ready to sit down, eat a little bit of food. Until next time, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. Keep tuning in. We'll talk to you soon. If you can't be good, be good at
Thanks
it.
for listening to this episode of the Dudes and Beer Podcast. To listen to our audio streams and chat with us live, download the official Dudes and Beer app for both Android and iDevices, available on the Google Play and iTunes markets. For more episodes, content, and information, visit us online at dudesandbeer.com. You can also find our episodes on Spreaker, SoundCloud, YouTube, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast service. Dudes and Beer is a proud member of the Revolution Digital Group family of podcasts. Thanks for listening, everybody, and until next time, drink responsibly.